Echoes in the Dark. Chapter 1, The Last Train. The clock at the station struck midnight with a hollow clang that echoed through the nearly empty platforms. Clara adjusted the strap of her worn leather satchel and stepped into the final carriage of the night train. The interior was dimly lit, its lights buzzing faintly, and the polished windows reflected her weary face. She had taken this route countless times, yet tonight the air seemed different, thicker, heavier, as though the train itself carried a burden. Clara slid into a seat by the window, exhaling slowly as the train shuddered to life. At first, she thought she was alone. Then she noticed him. Across the aisle, 3 rows ahead, sat a man in a long, dark coat. His posture was unnaturally rigid, his hands folded neatly in his lap. He stared straight ahead, unmoving, unblinking, as if carved from stone. Clara hadn't seen him board, nor had she heard the door creak open. The train plunged into a tunnel and the lights flickered. Darkness swallowed the carriage for a heartbeat. When the glow returned, Clara's pulse quickened. The man had not moved, but his head was now tilted slightly, just enough that she felt his gaze brush against her. She looked away, pressing her eyes to the glass, watching her reflection tremble against the blur of black tunnels. But when she blinked, she saw it, another reflection, faint but unmistakable, seated directly behind her own. The man. And this time he was smiling. Chapter 2, The Passenger's Shadow. Clara jerked around. The seat behind her was empty. Her heart hammered, her breath sharp in her chest. She forced herself to laugh quietly, convincing herself it was a trick of the light, a shadow distorted by the glass. Yet the unease remained, pressing down on her shoulders like invisible hands. Minutes crawled by. The train rattled on, its rhythm almost hypnotic. Across the aisle, the man in the coat still sat motionless. His face was partially hidden by the brim of his hat, but Clara swore his lips curled upward every time the lights flickered. She tried distracting herself by opening the small notebook she always carried. Words spilled onto the page, fragmented sentences, shapes of thoughts. But when she glanced down at her writing, the ink seemed wrong. The letters she had written twisted into words she didn't recognize. You should not be here. The pen slipped from her fingers. She froze. The carriage door creaked open at the far end. A gust of cold air swept in, rattling the windows. Clara looked up, expecting another passenger, but the corridor beyond was empty. Still, the door swung shut as though someone invisible had passed through. Her eyes returned to the man in the coat. His seat was empty. Clara's throat tightened. She turned slowly toward the window. Her reflection stared back, except it wasn't hers alone. Behind her shoulder, faint as smoke, was the silhouette of the man. Closer now, and whispering. She couldn't hear the words, but she could feel them against her skin, as if the air itself spoke. She bolted upright, stumbling toward the door, desperate to move to another carriage. Her hand grasped the handle, only to find it locked. The whispering stopped. Silence stretched, suffocating. Then, in the reflection, the man's pale hand rested on her shoulder, but she felt nothing. Chapter 3, Whispers of the Past. When the train screeched to a halt at a small rural station, Clara staggered off, gasping for air. The platform was deserted, bathed in the yellow glow of a single flickering lamp. She glanced back at the carriage. It was empty. No trace of the man. Shaken, she retreated into the tiny waiting room where an old bulletin board hung crooked on the wall. Most of the notices were faded timetables, but one yellowed newspaper clipping caught her eye. Tragedy strikes midnight line. Derailment claims 27 lives. Clara's breath caught. The article was dated 20 years earlier. Among the blurred photographs was one of a man, stern-faced, wearing a long, dark coat, her veins turned to ice. It was him, the silent passenger. The article mentioned he had been one of the victims found in the last carriage. His body, they wrote, had been discovered upright in his seat, untouched by fire or wreckage, as though he had simply fallen asleep. Clara staggered back. Could he be some echo of that night? A remnant caught between steel and shadow? The thought chilled her. But what terrified her more was the strange sense that he wasn't haunting the train. He was following her. Outside, the whistle blew. The train was preparing to leave again. For reasons she couldn't explain, Clara's feet moved on their own, carrying her back toward the platform. The door of the last carriage yawned open, waiting, and deep inside she thought she heard her name whispered. Chapter 4. The final carriage. Clara stepped inside, her pulse thundering in her ears. The carriage was darker than before, its air heavy with the scent of smoke and iron. The seats seemed older, torn at the edges, as though the train itself had slipped back in time. She walked slowly down the aisle, her footsteps echoing unnaturally loud. At the far end sat the man in the coat. His face was now fully visible, gaunt, pale, his eyes hollow pools of shadow. Yet when he spoke, his voice was calm, almost gentle. "You boarded this train long ago, Clara," her throat constricted. "No, I'm alive. I'm not." His smile widened. "Are you certain?" Images flooded her mind, screeching metal, fire, a terrible crash she didn't remember living through. She stumbled, clutching the seatbacks, her vision spinning. Was she remembering or imagining? The man stood, his figure towering, yet strangely weightless. He extended a hand. "The journey ends where it began." Clara backed away, shaking her head. But when she glanced at the windows, her reflection was gone. The glass showed only darkness, and within it, faint shapes of other passengers staring silently, their eyes hollow like his. The train roared, accelerating into an endless tunnel. Lights burst and died, plunging the world into shadow. Clara screamed, but no sound left her lips. The last thing she saw was the man's face, close to hers, whispering words she finally understood. "You were never meant to leave." And then silence. When the train emerged from the tunnel, the carriage was empty once more. Only the faint impression of a body remained on the seat where Clara had once sat.